So, I just learned about the Frank Lloyd Wright house massacre, a crime so brutal, so bizarre, it makes you wonder if the blueprints included a murder patio. I cannot believe this isn't a more famous story, because in August 1914, at one of the most beautiful homes in America, 7 people were hacked and burned to death, and the killer was the cook. So, how does a man go from serving lunch to swinging an axe? Good to see you. I'm Amy. Let's recap. So this wasn't just any house. This was Taliesin, Frank Lloyd Wright's pride and joy, his sanctuary, his architectural love letter to the Wisconsin countryside. And it was gorgeous, the kind of place that makes you want to sip tea on the terrace and say pretentious things about light and space. But on August 15, 1914, that dream home turned into a nightmare because while everyone sat down for lunch, one man walked in with an axe, locked the doors, and started killing. And then, as if that wasn't enough, he set the place on fire. 7 people dead. One of America's most famous architects in shock, and the whole thing kicked off by their new cook. So how do we get from soup to slaughter? Let's go back to the beginning. You need to know 2 things about Frank Lloyd Wright. 1, he was a genius. 2, he was not exactly living the traditional married with kids lifestyle. See, Taliesin wasn't just his studio. It was his hideaway with Mamah Borthwick, the woman he left his wife and 6 kids for. And in 1914, that was a scandal that could make your name the headline and your face the sermon illustration. About a decade before the massacre, Frank Lloyd Wright was living what you might call the architect's dream. Mid-30s, world famous, drowning in commissions, but also apparently very done with his wife of nearly 20 years, Catherine Tobin. 6 kids together, and he's like, yeah, I think I'm gonna pivot. So in 1903, Wright is hired to design a house for a Chicago businessman. Some reports call this guy his neighbor, but his name was Edwin Cheney. And here's where the plot thickens. And by thickens, I mean it turns into a Victorian scandal, the likes of which people back then had never seen. Because before long, old Frank is in a full-blown affair with Edwin's wife, Mamah Borthwick Cheney, a whip-smart, highly spirited feminist who was basically the opposite of the quiet, traditional wife he had at home. They didn't even have the shame to hide it. They ran off to Europe together, which in 1909 was basically that era's version of changing your Facebook status to it's complicated and tagging your new partner. By the time they came back in 1910, Mamah's marriage was over. She was divorced, but Frank's not so much. His wife flat out refused to give him a divorce and wouldn't until 1922. But that didn't stop him. Instead, Wright convinced his mother to buy him some land in Spring Green, Wisconsin. It's about 200 miles away from Chicago, but near where he grew up. And on that land, he built his masterpiece, Taliesin, an estate in his signature prairie school style. It's named after a Welsh word which means shining brow, which is a poetic way of saying I'm building my love bungalow on the side of a hill. And love bungalow is exactly what all the scandalized community neighbors around there called it. Even the papers, love bungalow. So by 1911, Frank and Mamah were officially living in sin there. They kept Taliesin running with a small household staff, including 30-year-old Julian Carlton, who worked as the cook. Now, most accounts describe him as quiet, polite, maybe a little intense, but nothing, and I mean nothing, that screamed, hey, you know what, one day I'm gonna burn you alive. So life at Taliesin was basically an architectural Instagram feed come to life. Rolling hills, perfect sunsets, and a lot of comments. But Frank and his little lady loved it. He spent so much time there with her that he started getting less projects, which isn't a great idea when you're trying to keep up with a household staff, 6 kids, a wife, and a mistress. But in 1913, Frank landed a big commission, the Midway Gardens, a massive beer garden and concert venue in Chicago. It was exactly the kind of high-profile project he needed to reboot his career, which is why on Saturday, August 15, 1914, he was in Chicago, deep in that project, while back at Taliesin, the cook was about to become the headline. It's just after noon. Mamah is on the patio with her 2 kids, 9-year-old Martha and 11-year-old John. They normally lived full-time with their father, but this summer they were in Wisconsin for a visit with their mother. Inside the house, a small group of men were in the dining room. It was carpenter Billy Weston, 35, and his 13-year-old son Ernest, 2 young draftsmen, Emil Braudel and Herbert Fritz, the gardener, David Lindblom in his 50s, and 66-year-old laborer Thomas Brunker. They're all taking a break from work, probably grateful to be out of the sun and eating a good meal. Well, at lunchtime, Julian does exactly what's expected of him. He cooks and serves Mamah and her kids their soup course. It's the most normal thing in the world. But then, as they start to eat, he comes up behind Mamah and without a word, brings an axe down on her skull. John is next. 1 blow, gone. Martha bolts, running for her life, but Julian catches her. 4 more axe blows to the head. She can't move, but somehow she is still alive. In the span of seconds, the quiet, sunny patio at Taliesin becomes the most dangerous place in Wisconsin, and no one inside the house even knew what was happening yet. Meanwhile, in the dining room on the other side of the house, the 5 men and the boy are settling in for lunch. Same as before. Julian brings in the soup, serves it up, and then quietly steps out, bolting the doors behind him. One of the draftsmen, 24-year-old Herbert Fritz, he's going to be one of the only 2 survivors. He later remembered seeing something flowing under the screen door from the court. At first, they thought it was soap suds, which is also very strange, but harmless. But when it reached under his chair, the smell hit him. Gasoline. Outside the door, what he didn't know then, was there's Julian lighting that gasoline on fire. Seconds later, a streak of flame shoots in under his chair, covering the whole room. It's an inferno. Flames raced across the floors, gasoline everywhere. It's all on fire, up the walls, onto their clothes. The men panic. They're smashing at the windows, desperate to escape. But on the other side is Julian, waiting with his axe. And he's not done. He goes back to the terrace, douses Mamah and John's bodies in gasoline, then pours it over Martha, who is still somehow clinging to life, before setting them all on fire. When help finally gets there, it's chaos. The survivors, only 2, are burned, bleeding, in shock. Taliesin, this beautiful hand-built masterpiece, is gutted. And Julian, well, he hasn't gone far. They find him hiding in the basement furnace room, having swallowed hydrochloric acid in an attempt to kill himself, but it didn't work, at least not right away. He was taken into custody but refused to talk. Not about the attack, not about his motive, nothing. Within weeks, he was dead from starvation, the acid having destroyed his throat. So here's what we're left with. 7 people gone, including Mamah and her 2 kids, and no definitive answer as to why. Historians have mostly decided that Julian was mentally ill, based on his wife's testimony that he'd been paranoid in the weeks before the massacre. Apparently, she was also working at the house, but that day, he had told her to take her stuff and leave. But the rumors took on a life of their own. Was Julian possibly disgusted by this living in sin arrangement at Taliesin? Did somebody hire him to get revenge on Frank Lloyd Wright? Was it retaliation because Mamah had fired him and his wife that very day, making that their last day at work, although some other sources say that she was going to fire him at the end of the month. It also, given that this was 1914, could have been retaliation for racism he faced as a black man. The truth is we might never know. But that's not the end of the house's story, though. Frank Lloyd Wright would rebuild Taliesin not once, but twice after that. But the shadow of what happened in the summer of 1914 never really left it. Today, it's still standing. It's a Frank Lloyd Wright Museum and National Historic Landmark. And if you ever visit, you can still find pieces of that day in the form of charred ceiling beams that he salvaged from the rubble and repurposed into the new house. Imagine standing under them, knowing that they were there when the patio ran red and the walls burned. Did you know about this? How did I not know about this? Thanks for spending your time with us today. Don't go away before you like and subscribe so you never miss a recap. I'm Amy. Chris and I are here 3 times a week with more stories. Until next time, take care.